Hello, my name is Victor Shelton. I'm the NRCS State Agronomist and Grazing Specialist in Indiana. I was part of the PCS revision team. The key goal today is to help you understand the main concepts of the new pasture condition score sheet. This is what the new pasture condition score sheet looks like. Let's first note a few things at the top of the score sheet. First of all, we have pasture ID. This can be a field number or whatever the producer wants to call that field. Then we have livestock type. The type of livestock can make a difference in the type of plants that are desired. So we're going to note here whether it's cattle, sheep, goats, horses, or maybe a combination. Then you're going to have a choice of using either the type of soil, ecological site description, or forage suitability group as needed here. And then lastly, we want to note the season's precipitation and temperature trends. Weather certainly can have an impact on growth, so it needs to be noted for future reference. The PCS involves a visual evaluation of 10 indicators, all which rate the pasture. Each indicator or factor has 5 possible ratings. These range from the lowest or the poorest condition as a 1 to the highest or best condition at a 5. These identify the extent of any pasture challenges and help us to determine the likely causes. Evaluate each of the indicators separately. The indicators then at the end can be combined into an overall score. The first indicator is percent desirable plants. It's important to know and understand what species are desirable. It needs to be based on the type of livestock presently on the pasture and what is desirable to them. Each state will eventually have a desirable species list, ideally according to livestock type. This is based off of dry weight. We use dry weight because it standardizes everything. It is the weight of the forage after all moisture is removed. There can be a huge difference in the amount of moisture present in forages. We also figure how much forage is needed for the livestock based on dry matter. Different animal types have different preferences. Some species of plants are just not consumed by hardly anything, and others only during certain stages of growth. But both of those should probably fall in the intermediate or undesirable categories and not be called desirable species. Desirable species are ones that are preferred and rarely consumed by the livestock type. Certainly, people have a different opinion on what is desirable, but that preference should not be a forced preference. I hear people say, my cows will eat anything. Well, that's probably true if they don't have a choice. Invasive species normally will fall into the undesirable or intermediate category, but not always, depending on the type of livestock. Goats certainly will eat things that cattle won't eat. Using step point would provide excellent information for this indicator also, and we'll talk about that more toward the end of the presentation. The next indicator is percent legume. It's also by dry weight. We have changed these slightly from the old pasture condition score sheet, and we've done this based on land grant university input on introduced pastures. The benefits tend to taper or flatten off once 40% legume is actually reached. And we've also put more emphasis on whether the legume is bloating or not. A lot of our legumes, especially if you get over 50% bloating of legumes out there, that is definitely a problem. So that's going to get scored a lot lower than if they were non-bloating legumes. But stands with greater than 40% non-bloating legumes is actually fairly rare. Let's look at some examples. If a person has a stand with over 40% ladino clover, then that being a bloating legume will put them down to a score of 2. This could actually happen quite often, even with combinations of red and white clovers, which are both bloating legumes. Now, if the percent legume, bloating or not, is under 41%, then it's going to be a 5. That 5 is at 31 to 40% legumes. Now, it doesn't state it here, but if you happen to have all non-bloating legumes and they were over 40%, or the bloating legume component was not over 40%, but the total legume was, then you can still count it as a 5. The critical thing is making sure that the bloating legumes are not over 40%. Let's look now at estimating percent legume. We got 3 photos right here. And if we visually estimated how much legume was in each of these, then we could say that the first one might be 10%, the second one maybe 25, 30%, and the third one about 50% or so. If we take these, if we dug clipping out there and actually dried them down and separated them out and weighed them, we would find that the first one is actually only 6% by dry weight, the second one 15% by dry weight, and the third 27% by dry weight. Now, that is a white clover or a ladino clover in those pictures. And that type of clover is generally about 50% of the wet visual estimate. Red clover tends to be higher. It's about 90% of that visual estimate. Alfalfa, if you have it in a pasture field, is almost 100% of the visual estimate. Step point can also be used to estimate percent legume, and it's closer to that dry weight percent when you do it. If you're visually estimating the dry weight, reduce white clover estimates by half for the dry weight. This is only an issue with the white clovers. The next indicator is plant cover. This is really asking, how good is the solar panel? Live plant cover is the amount of live stem and green leaves. Stands need to be dense, with a high stem tiller count, and most of all, an excellent interceptor of sunlight. A good solar panel. Is there adequate leaf area to intercept that sunlight? Will that bite and animal takes be of high quality live forage, or does it include dead standing material? Standing dead material was under plant residue with the old score sheet. It's easier now to rate at this location. Management factors that would influence this would be frequency of grazing, length of grazing period, stocking rates, density, and length of rest period. This can be a little tougher to judge as you go into late fall and winter. There will be some green color left in live dormant plants, even though photosynthesis has pretty much stopped. Long deferments from grazing will tend to be discounted some due to more standing material present, especially over time. This indicator will also rate lower during winter for sure. But remember, it is only one indicator. If you are interested, there is an app that can assist you in measuring live plant cover. It's called Canopio, which measures all the green material or the live green solar panel that's present. From this picture on the screen, Canopio actually indicates that there's 94.89% live green canopy. If you looked at this field from a windshield view, you would probably underestimate how much solar panel we actually have. Next is plant diversity. We want and we need diversity in pastures. Plant diversity helps to make a pasture be more reliable, a more reliable supplier of forage throughout the growing season. The more functional groups that are present, the greater the diversity and resilience to changes in weather and long-term forage quality. At least 15% is needed to be considered and counted as a dominant species. A functional group can include several species, but also needs to make up at least 15% of the stand to be counted. We have four main functional groups. Those include cool season grasses, warm season grasses, legumes, and non-leguminous forbs. By quickly assessing the functional groups that are present and also how many dominant species that are present, the ones that are greater than 15%, you can quickly score this indicator. Several minor species within the same functional group that add up to be at least 15% can also be counted for that functional group. This is actually fairly uncommon, but it can happen. It generally doesn't stay that way long because one of the dominant species generally crowds out those minor species over time. Again, this information could also be collected from using step point. Let's look at an example here. And if you notice, we have a fairly high percentage of undesirable species. Actually, it's 52%. So if a desirable species are less than 50%, or in other words, undesirables are over 50%, then it's automatically a score of 1. In this example, we have 4 dominant desirable species that are over 15%. Timothy and bluegrass and the red clover and the white clover, that's 4. We also have 3 functional groups being represented. We have cool season grasses, legumes, and forbs. And those forbs, the chicory, the plantain, and the dandelion, add up to at least 15%, so we can count them as a functional group. So because of this, they have 3 functional groups. They have 4 dominant desirable species present. This one's going to rate a 5. Residue is dead plant material in various stages of decay, and litter is the uppermost layer, including freshly fallen or slightly decomposed material. For this indicator, it should be thought to be primarily what is on the soil surface, not standing dead plant material, which is part of the live plant cover indicator. The OPCS indicator for residue was more about assessing standing residue and its impact on forage quality, especially for those Northeast dairy operations, but it's not now. Plant residue now is more about soil cover. If you look carefully at the photo that's on the slide, you can see that bare soil is very easily seen. And because of this, we're going to rate this a 1. Again, this indicator is all about soil cover. What is important about plant residue and litter on the surface? It's important for protected cover for the soil. It helps to slow evaporation. It keeps the soil cool. It's a potential carbon source for the soil and for increasing potential for improved rainwater infiltration. Remember, residue is plant material in various stages of decay. Litter is generally the uppermost layer of detached residue on the soil surface, not standing dead material. When you're in the field, pull back the canopy and look. Proper amount and frequency of grazing are critical in maintaining productive pastures. Close and frequent grazing causes loss of vigor, reduces density of the desired species, reduces yield, and can promote erosion. It can also have an impact on bite size and intake. Differences in species, plant maturity, stocking rate, location, and distance to water and shade, and even mineral availability may cause uneven grazing to occur. We see here in these examples two extremes, from overgrazing throughout and refused and undesired plants to a pasture that's being grazed evenly throughout with no overgrazing. Note the differences in bite size and quality. Zone grazing occurs when one end of the pasture or certain areas are heavily grazed and the rest is lightly grazed or even ungrazed. Zone grazing occurs on pastures with long walking distances from one end to the other, especially when shady areas or mineral feeding or watering sites are a long distance from some parts of the field. When zone grazing is occurring, along with some uneven grazing throughout, rate it a 3. Rate the pasture a 4 if the pasture is uniformly grazed to, say, target stop grazing heights, but there is still some zone grazing occurring. Livestock concentration areas include, but are not limited to, winter feeding and loafing areas. Water quality degradation is the main focus here. Therefore, the distance it is to water is important, and the actual size of the concentrated area is also important. Size is used instead of percentage. There were some real cases where the percentage gave the rating a higher score than the risk that was actually occurring. An example, a large pasture with many concentrated areas of bare ground received a rating the same as a small pasture with only one area because the percentage was the same. The pasture with more bare ground would receive the lower rating with the new wording. Let's look at some examples. Let's first think about the size of the concentrated area. What is 0.1 acres? It's approximately about 66 by 66 feet. You can visually estimate this, step it off, or just measure it. In the first field, the concentrated area is over 0.1 acres and is less than 100 feet from the water body. So it could be rated a 1 because it has a higher chance of probability of water quality issues. In the second example, the concentrated area is less than 0.1 acres, but it is still less than 100 feet from the water body. So we're going to rate it a 2. In the last example, the concentrated area is greater than 0.1 acres, but it is now over 100 feet from the water body, so that distance is helping to mitigate potential issues, so it is rated a 3. The first example here has a concentrated area of less than 0.1 acres, and it is also over 100 feet from the water body, so it is low risk and rated a 4. In the next example, there are no concentrated areas in the field, so it is rated a 5. The last example is a field with less than 1 acre. We seem to be seeing more of these. Maybe it's a horse lot, a few goats, or maybe it's a 4-H calf or a bull lot. We will use the percentage of 10% instead of 0.1 acres for the field which are under an acre of size. Take the disturbed area and divide by the field acreage. In this case, it is less than 10% at 7.5%, but it is also under 100 feet to the stream, so we're going to rate it at 2. Let's now look at soil compaction and soil regenerative features. These indicators focus on the soil structure, plant roots, organic matter, and soil life. We want deep growing roots, good water holding capacity for plant productivity, plant health, and nutrient density. Healthy soil makes healthy plants and helps grow healthy animals. Now, compaction is still a major component. The compaction indicator should be looked at in the top 12 inches. To know for sure whether or not there are compaction issues limiting plant growth, 2 holes should be dug. Yes, we're going to use a shovel. The first hole should be in a fence line where no compaction is evident and where animal hooves have not had an impact, yet they are still able to graze the grass growing there. The other hole should be dug inside the pasture in the same soil type, ideally in an area that you think might have a compaction issue. Then observe and compare in each hole the ease of getting that shovel into the soil, the rooting depth, that root morphology or direction of growth. Those roots will be growing down through the soil profile, not horizontally, which is an indicator of compaction. The soil structure should look more like cottage cheese, not platy, especially if that platiness is in the top 12 inches, then that is another indicator of compaction. But then also observe any earthworm or insect presence or activity. For this indicator, you will choose the most adverse factor for deciding score based on roots and compaction being the primary indicators and considered first, and then use soil color and soil life as secondary indicators where relevant. Soil color and soil life shouldn't be the deciding factors, but used for discussion for soil health and as indicators where improvements could be beneficial. Roots can be adversely affected by not only compacted layers, but also from overgrazing and haying. Remember, healthy pasture soil should have good aggregates, vertical roots, and soil life. Soil regenerative features focus on the condition of plant roots and the abundance of soil life, both of which can improve important soil attributes like structure and organic matter. Soils with roots growing deep and downward have the potential to feed large and diverse populations of soil life. Contrasting soil color changes in the soil with darker soil in the more biological active upper layer is usually a very positive indicator. Worms, worm tunnels, or other insect presence and activity are also good indicators. Again, choose the most adverse subfactor for deciding score based on roots and compaction being the primary indicators and considered first, and then soil color and soil life as secondary indicators where fitting. In this case, since there is a compaction issue, that subfactor dictates the score of this indicator, so it's going to be a 3. In simplest terms, plant vigor refers to the health of the plant. A loss of plant vigor can cause a loss in desirable species and plant cover. Plant recovery should be evaluated based on average growth rates for the plant community involved at the time of the season being rated. The more severe the grazing, like grazing below stock grazing heights, the longer the recovery that's going to be required. Most severe grazing occurs when a pasture is overstocked. Pasture plants, when continuously grazed, have little or no recovery. Color is a major indicator of plant vigor. Yellowing plants can indicate drought, insect damage, or prolonged heavy usage. Pale green grass plants indicate low fertility or cool, wet, poor soils or poor growing conditions. Fields where nitrogen-starved grasses exist will be obvious and have dark green spots around dung or urine patches and be pale in comparison to the rest of the pasture. The primary things to consider when rating plant vigor are color and rate of regrowth, especially following a grazing event, but also taking into consideration the grazing height of plants and size and density of plants and productivity. This indicator is purposely placed as one of the last indicators. Earlier indicator information can be useful in helping to score plant vigor. In the first picture, color for the desired species isn't too bad, but there's no recovery. In the second picture, there's good recovery and there's also good, healthy green forage color. That first pasture would be rated most likely a 1, the second pasture a 5. You see, color is a very good indicator of plant vigor. The erosion indicator is fairly well defined. Make sure you circle all that apply. You can certainly have multiple types of erosion present in the same field. Circling all types of erosion that are present on this pasture. Both sheet and rail and the start of gully erosion are present. The most adverse type indicates the score. In this case, it's going to be a 1. Gullies are considered all types for this score sheet. Now let's add up the scores. Our overall score gives us an idea of suggested management changes. A pasture rated with a high score is well managed, with plant and animal productivity being sustained or even enhanced. By rating the key indicators common to all pastures, pasture condition can be evaluated and the primary reasons for a low condition score can be identified. A low rating typically means that the pasture has one or more challenges. It may be poor plant growth, weedy species invasion, low forage quantity or quality, maybe it's soil loss, increased runoff, or impaired water quality in or adjacent to the pasture. Step point was mentioned several times during this presentation. The step point method can provide data for at least 5 indicators. The step point method is highly recommended for the pasture condition score sheet because it answers 5 of the PCS indicators with numbers, not just visual. It also gives you more confidence to choose that score. It also gives you an accurate assessment of what the dominant forage species really are. By using a shovel for compaction and acreage for livestock concentration areas, you've got confident numbers for 2 other PCS indicators. This makes the remaining 3 indicators less subjective and a basis to more confidently score them. To do step point method of data collection, use your state step-in data collection sheet and take the same paced number of steps each time. This could be 3 steps for a smaller field or 10 steps each for a larger field. The goal is to collect a representative sample. Using the same foot each time, look at the point of your shoe and record what is present: the plant, residue, and bare ground. Step, collect more data. Step again, the same amount, collect the data. Continue doing this until you have 100 points, each representing 1%. This data can then be used to help fill out some of the indicators. Pastures should be rated at least annually. Rating these pastures can help us set and track trends on pasture condition. Those indicators may rank low initially, but as we improve management, we'll see improvements on the pasture condition score sheet. These scores and these summaries should be also addressed and discussed with the landowner in the field, if possible. This assessment is also usually needed for a cart. This is a list of PCS indicators that are presently being used in cart. Please refer to the January 2020 Guide to Pasture Condition Score Sheet for more details. If you are listening to this presentation from a website, please refer all questions to your state NRCS grazing or range specialist. Thank you.